Oh, that's great. That is. Yeah. Let's start with you opening the can.
Cracking a can. It's it's my special cursed water.
That's the first thing
Call it.
everybody heard. You awful man.
Mm.
Why you get less professional every week? I swear. Like,
I'm sorry, dude. I'm sorry. I'm I'm going through a phase at the minute of trying to find interesting non-alcoholic drinks. I don't know why. I could just drink water like I normally do, but
it's not very
I feel
interesting,
it's
though, is it? What is
no.
it that you used to drink? A shot of coffee with tonic water. With yeah, tonic water.
I thought it depends how far you were going back. I was just going Smirnoff,
Just straight
but
out
no,
the bottle.
no, it's a real thing. Tonic water with an espresso floating in the top. It's very grown
You
up.
told me that you invented that, and then I
Yeah, I
saw it
didn't.
advertised somewhere, and I was like, it's just another of Rich's just long historical lies upon lies upon lies, a rich tapestry of
Do
deceit, deception.
it's on my CV, so it's true. You know,
Well, anyway, it's wonderful to hear your voice and
you
listen to
do.
you drinking. What are
Thanks,
you on
thank
today?
you.
What are you on today? Maybe they'll sponsor us.
Liquid Death
Yeah, they're not going to sponsor us.
mango chainsaw. I've never
Mango.
heard of it.
It's how is that a flavour? How is chainsaw a flavour?
I I don't know. I don't know. But it's quite nice. It's all right.
What's it?
Nice.
It's
What are
just
you?
water though, right? It's just flavoured water.
It's like £4 a can
Why?
water. It's good. Um,
Posh water. Well, water's part of the theme today. Today we're talking about the new trend. Well, it's not a new trend, but the resurgence of the trend of living off grid. Um,
mm,
I think what we should do first of all is define what that actually means, because when you translate it into Spanish, there's a very different way of saying that. But why do we say off grid? Do you know?
I assume it's something to do with the power grid, is
Yeah,
it?
it's exactly that.
And being detached from that. I think there's various levels, isn't there, of living off grid, which I think we'll get into. But the idea of not having to pay for electricity, that sounds good to me.
Yeah, well, you see, in my research, I imagine that we both went down very different, separate paths because obviously I like my conspiracy theories, and
Mm,
a lot of the grid, uh, the electricity grid is really not that old. It's in the UK, it came in around 1920. I think it was just after the First World War that they
mm.
established the UK electricity grid. So really not that long ago, 100 years ago, just over. But it's all of the things that came with the concept of the grid, like the legislation and water and all of those things being transferred to state governed utilities.
Yeah, well, this is the job that my dad had for a million years. He started with it when it was GECB, so that's like in the 60s when it was a national company, and then I guess in the late 80s, early 90s, it all got privatized and went to Power Gen
Hmm.
and National Power and a few other smaller energy providers. Whereas now it seems like there's a million energy providers, and I never know who I'm actually paying anything.
Ah,
Um,
yeah.
but yeah, like the idea of getting off that grid is amazing. My sister and my brother-in-law have done it pretty well. They're solar powered up on their house, and my sister has an electric car.
Hmm.
So when COVID hit and everyone was like queuing for hours at petrol stations with nowhere to fucking go anyway,
Hmm.
my sister is just riding by, giving them the bird in her electric car that she got on a work scheme and gets fueled for absolutely nothing, which
Well,
is
so
pretty
so
cool.
that's what you're talking about there is self-sustainability, which is one of the key aspects of going off the grid. Um, but the motivations for people doing it vary depending on where you are in the world and on the individual as well. But I think for most people, the idea of having control over your own resources is very attractive. I mean, I'd love to be able to produce my own electricity. I mean, you do, don't you? Because I've seen balloons stick to you when you've been at a children's party or whatever. You produce your own electricity. We should plug you into something. But
Yeah, maybe.
beyond
It,
that, beyond the grid, beyond because the grid is a kind of catch-all term. It's not just the electricity; it's
mhm.
also your food, and I think to some extent, which again we'll talk about later, is your kind of political freedom or a sense of freedom from the state.
Yeah.
It's certainly true in Spain. I don't know about England, but when you move out to the village, as they say, for like all of the countryside here, when you move out to the village, um, there's an absence of law. I'm not saying it's entirely lawless, but you can definitely do things differently, behave differently in the village in comparison to the city. I mean, there's no speed limit, for example,
Really?
but you got to watch out for donkeys. So it's a kind of, you know, it's
But
two
so,
sides to that coin.
what's the bit of Spain that's like separatist? What's that? Is that
Oh, you're not going to draw me into a political discussion. That
No,
it,
I'm just
it
wondering if they have like different laws because
that's a hot topic at the moment. If
they
are
don't
you
count
talking about?
themselves.
You're not talking about Catalonia. You're not talking about
Yeah,
the.
yeah.
the
Or I think you'll find it's pronounced Catalonia, but I don't
no, it's not.
know. But like, aren't they like, oh, we don't count ourselves as part of Spain, so none of the laws apply here? And,
Uh,
oh,
it's
are you going to get chased out of Spain
we've
if you talk
literally just
about?
had a new oh man it's a conversation that's been going on for decades, and it comes mostly out of so Spain is very divided into regions, and they have very strong regional
Hmm.
identities in each place, to the point where some regions have their own dialects or their own language, Catalonia being the perfect example. But during Franco's rule, during the dictatorship, he was one of his goals was to create a united Spain, which meant eliminating any kind of fringe cultures or fringe regional kind of cultures, and he banned certain dialectical languages around Spain. So Catalan in Catalonia was banned, and these groups or these regions felt like they'd been kind of suppressed, and when Franco died and democracy arrived, um, they tried to kind of bring back their regional identity, and Catalonia has been doing that since, with their flag and their language. They speak another language. They speak Catalan. But we had there was an election last week, and it was all hinging on um, Sanchez, the current president of Spain,
Hmm.
obtaining votes from several parties that are separatist parties, or I should call them independence parties, I suppose, that were involved in a lot of things. It's very complicated. It's got nothing to do with off-grid, and I feel
All
like
right,
the
so
village.
yeah, I was. I mean, you banged on about it now
There
for
you go.
ages.
Yeah,
You could have
I
just said
heard you
no.
switch your mic off, and you were probably going, "Oh God,
I
shut
was,
up."
I was picking something out of my teeth. I've
Oh,
just
good.
been for a
Well,
barber.
what was it? A chicken leg?
A bit of gammon, if
Oh, gammon, lovely,
or,
nice.
or as you'd say, hammer.
Yeah, no, we wouldn't say it like that. We'd say "come on." Um,
All right, so it's nothing to do with them, but
no,
okay. Um,
back on track.
where-
Off grid,
yeah,
going
where
off
were we?
grid. A lot of people in the village, they live very different lives because they're not connected to all of the complications of city dwelling, which is not
Hmm.
just utilities; it's also the hustle and bustle and the political aspect and the things that you can do, the things that you can't do. I'm not saying that people go to live in the village so they can walk around firing guns into the air and setting fire to, I don't know, pigs or whatever.
Yeah,
Um, it's not that. It's just that um, you don't feel like as controlled by the state. I think when you're out in
yeah.
the open, you've got space, you've got your own electrical source through solar panels, whatever, and you're growing your own food, all of that stuff. So it's more than just being self-sufficient, I think. What do you
Hmm.
think?
Well, I think there's lots of reasons. There's uh, going back to the older cults, we had a podcast on that. If anyone's listening who hasn't listened to that one, it's my favourite one so far. So go and listen to it. But a lot of sort of religious sects will detach themselves from the rest of society, and part of that may involve like um, not having to pay for electricity, not having to
Hmm.
go out and pay for food. I think there's just genuine people who just don't agree with the way that society is at the minute, and a lot of them might have kids or whatever, and just want to raise their family in a way that they find more appealing. Sometimes it's a more old-fashioned way, or 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 a sense of um, stronger morals or whatever. I
Hmm.
think there's a lot of people go off grid for criminal reasons, just trying to escape something in their past
Yeah.
and uh, bugger off. And
It's funny you mentioned that because my ex, her brother tried to drown a man in a lake, and he went to
was it
us.
you?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. It was before I knew her. He would have done if he could have got his hands on me. But um, after that, he went to Australia because that's where
Really?
criminals go, and he's
Yeah.
just living out there. I'm not going to mention any names because maybe they're still looking for him.
All
But
right. But no, I think there's a multitude of reasons, ranging from the completely innocent to the quite debauched. Um, but I don't know. I think each to their own. I think if there are places in the world that are available where you can
hmm.
go and sort of create your own society or your own way of living, and be detached from a lot of the bullshit that 99% of the population of this planet have to put up with, then go for it. I mean, it sounds wicked.
I mean, as you know, I want to. I'd like to go off grid, and I've been thinking about it. I've been planning it for some time, and I think I probably will within the next year. But one of the biggest challenges for me is that there aren't any women with less than well, with 10 toes is what I'm trying to say out there in the villages. And one of the things that puts me off is not being able to, as a single man, maybe find a partner out in the middle of nowhere. However, maybe some people move to the countryside because they have access to, I want to say donkeys or like cattle, especially. I'm about to say some awful things. I'm going to stop myself because we've got 3 people listening, and one of them might be my mum. So yes, I completely agree. I'll give you some more reasons from a list here that I've got. Reasons that people go off grid, because they want to become more resourceful, because they want to live off nature, or they want to connect with nature, obviously. If they want to enhance their skill sets, and then community. This does sound a bit cultish already.
Yeah.
Creativity, that's related to one of the my examples of an off-grid community that I'll share with you in a minute. Um, but yeah, those are the reasons that people go off grid. But how do they survive? This is what always fascinates me. If you're an off-gridder, you save a lot of money for sure because you don't have to pay for your utilities. But um, how do you earn? What do you think people
Well,
do?
I think you find other off gridders, and it goes back, doesn't it? It like goes to bartering systems. I'll take that load of wood off you to buy my house in exchange for labour or my surplus stock of courgettes that I have. Um, I, and I quite like that idea. I think that's quite nice. I prefer that to money, I think.
Well, all of the off-gridders that I follow on YouTube have some kind of side hustle, usually where they're
Well,
selling.
they're on YouTube for
Yeah,
starters. That's
exactly.
yeah,
Which
yeah,
one of the things, one of the main sources of income, I think, for most self-pronounced off-gridders is to talk about going off-grid and to teach people how to go off-grid. They write
yeah,
books, they make courses, they teach online, and then in addition to that, selling their produce. So one of the main guys that I started following years ago. He has his own tea tea brand. He makes like
Oh
these
yeah.
herbal teas, and it's very successful. I think a lot of people like to support it as well because you have a sense of it being more organic, and because it's not connected to like big industries or whatever, you feel like maybe you're getting a product that's a little bit more natural. So
Hmm.
yeah, there's loads of stuff there. I've got a huge list of things here: guiding hikers possibly to their deaths, fishing for profit. I don't know if you're not allowed to do that in Spain. Off-grid hunting, selling
Yeah.
eggs. Selling eggs. We were talking to our friend James earlier, who's gone semi-off-grid. He
Hmm.
said he was sent us a video, which we're going to play in a moment, of his off-grid um, setup, and immediately revealed that he wasn't off-grid because there's just an electricity pylon right in front of him. Um, but yeah,
Well,
he's
that's I think this is what we're saying, though. There's different levels of it, isn't there? There's my sister having an electric car and solar panels, and there's guys who've dug bunkers in their back garden.
yeah, yeah. But when we're talking about off-grid, are we really just talking about life 120 years ago?
It feels like that. Um, one of my uh, one theory. Well, it's not even a theory; it's a thing. I was going to say conspiracy theory, but it's not. It's a thing. But it's the most likely way that like an apocalypse is going to happen is probably a solar flare.
Hmm.
Now, the last solar flare hit the Earth in like the very late 1800s, and it was just as the telegram system had been set up, and it fucked it. It just like destroyed it. It
Hmm.
was working one day, the next day it wasn't. But basically, in terms of electricity and stuff, that's all they had, and communications. If a solar flare was to hit the Earth now and just wipe out all electronics, we would go back to sort of 150 years ago. We'd have to like start looking at steam and getting everything done by horses and all that. And we'd all have to be a lot more self-sufficient. Eventually, all the food that exists at the minute would run out, wouldn't it? And one of the theories is it all goes to shit because we become tribal again. Yeah,
Hmm.
we go out hunting. Uh, I'm walking down the road. I see uh, I don't know, a tiger that's escaped from Twycross Zoo. And I think, oh, I'll have that for dinner. I go to shoot it and accidentally hit Dave next door's daughter in the face with a bullet, and she
You've you've
dies.
you've put a lot of thought into this. Is this a novel that you're working on or something?
Well, no, but then like a tribal war happens and everything goes to shit.
Well, in
Um,
that circumstance, what happens to all of the social media influencers? They'll all be out in the street doing like TikTok
just
dances out of
I'd
trauma.
just shouting to anyone that would listen. That's what we'd have to do. We'd just have to shout really loud across the continent.
I need some form of attention, but you don't. That's the thing. You don't want attention in a post-apocalyptic scenario. You might as well talk about your first group here. I'm going to put them up. Bing.
Okay, are we
There they
are we
are.
going for Alaskan bush people?
No, no, don't say it out
Oh,
loud. No, I'm
oh,
doing it in reverse because it's very
oh,
on
sorry.
theme. Doomsday
Okay,
preppers.
doomsday preppers. Yeah. So these are people who, for whatever reason, believe that the end of the world is coming pretty soon. Um,
What are some of those reasons? Solar flares, the magnetic fields flipping. Isn't there? There's a theory about that.
yeah,
One of
that's one that they
the poles
believe in.
reversing.
Um, there's the religious aspect of it just being what do they call it? The rapture.
Revelation, the rapture. Yeah.
Yeah, and like everyone gets all messed up, and then at the end of it, they get beamed up. Uh, which, yep, okay,
Volcanic
that's
eruption. Is
yeah,
it Yosemite Park that has the no
your,
yellow?
Yosemite.
That's what
Yeah,
I said. That's what I said. God,
yeah,
jeez,
yeah. Well, there's massive super volcanoes all over the planet
everywhere.
potentially. Um, and then it could be things like World War III, nuclear war, that sort of thing. There's a lot of reasons people do it, but it's become an actual industry now.
Mm.
Whilst I was looking, doing a bit of research, if you were going to have an online store for preppers, what would you call it, Ben?
You put me on the spot. I
Whatever you say is not going to be as good as Sergeant Prepper's Lonely
oh
Hearts
my
Club
god, that
dot
is
com.
brilliant.
Yeah, yeah. So Sergeant
I'm in.
Prepper's,
I'm in.
yeah, it's,
Where do I sign
it's,
up?
it's brilliant. But yeah, that's like an online store. I
Yeah.
was reading an interview with him in the Guardian, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I was into it in sort of." 2015, I started prepping myself, and then of course COVID hit, and everyone was doing it. So
Yeah.
he set
I
set up
did.
this
Yeah.
set up a website selling, everything really from camping stuff to
Mm.
like astronaut food and
Yeah. Yeah.
freeze dried food and
I'm s-
lots of books on how to do it.
I'm sure
Um,
it's no surprise to you that I joined one of those groups, and we discussed uh, well, various survival skills, but also like how to what weapons to get, how to manufacture weapons. I shot myself in the thumb with a catapult with a ball bearing.
right.
While I was practicing on my balcony, I was trying to shoot a tree. I will confess to having had a couple of beers, but I took a chunk out of my thumb, and I just thought, if the apocalypse comes, I'm done. I'm done for. It doesn't matter if what I've got to protect myself with. Um, I mean, I can't even shoot a tree without grievously harming myself.
If you
Um,
were serious about it, though, you'd have kept that chunk of thumb and pickled it for a future,
Cultivated some
a,
mold.
a little snack. But yeah, so he's made a business out of it, and he actually seemed like a really sensible guy in this
Hmm.
article I was reading. But his business thrives off natural disasters and political unrest. He was like, "Yeah, so COVID finished, but then the Ukraine war came along, and
Yeah,
everyone's Ukraine and Russia, everyone's shitting themselves about Russian nukes." And he's like, "So that was great." And I imagine, when October 7th in Palestine kicked off, he's like doing a little dance and like, "Hey, I'm making loads of money." Um,
I
so
think.
it's a funny business to be in, I suppose. But
I mean, there's plenty of money to make out of other people's paranoia, but I think that Louis Theroux did a video inside one of the top tier bunkers. It's like an inverse skyscraper. It just shoots down into the earth, and
I've not seen
all of
that.
these millionaires have basically they've bought their ticket, to survive. Um, and they've got these luxury apartments with all of these huge air vents and everything. So it's not just the common man that thinks about the end of the world. The elites are prepared as well.
Mm.
But it just makes me wonder, like, if you've been doing this for decades, as a prepper, do you feel a sense of disappointment when like things don't go wrong because you've got all of this
Uh,
stuff?
well, I suppose they'd sort of justify it by saying, "Well, all this stuff is good for 1,000 years, so if
Yeah.
I'm not using it, my kids use
Yeah,
it."
but then imagine just dying of natural causes. You'd be gutted.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Oh.
I mean, another big one that they're scared of is AI, which is what we were
Mm.
talking about last week. AI could pose a risk if it's not aligned with human values and interests, and in the worst case scenario, AI could cause a human extinction.
Yeah.
So people are prepping for that. Asteroid impact, that's always one to worry about. Uh, but you know, the likelihood of these things happening are fairly slim. But
Mm.
then we had the pandemic, didn't we? Which, I don't know well, I do know what side of the fence you sit on in that, but like, it could have been a lot worse, you
Mm.
know.
Yeah.
Um, and COVID turned out not to be that bad for the majority of people.
We
But
survived it.
before that, there was that Ebola breakout, wasn't there, in Africa? And that basically melts you from the inside out. If
Yeah.
that had have become a pandemic, it's a bit more serious, isn't
And
it?
emo music.
Yeah,
We survived that as well. That was awful.
you're still shitting it over that reggaeton though, or whatever.
Ah, yeah, reggaeton. That's a reason to live in a bunker for sure.
Yeah. But yeah, it's a multi-million-dollar industry. Apparently, you talked about bunkers. I mean, some of these bunkers are, worth far more than my house and are bigger. It's the amount of money that people are spending on
Hmm.
scenario that's pretty unlikely to happen.
I suppose it's
Um,
just just a level of reassurance and um, yeah, it's not so much self sufficiency in the moment. It's a sense of being able to be self sufficient
mhm,
should there be a situation that requires it, which is kind of weird, like preemptive self sufficiency. Um,
yeah.
I wonder if those people that get into prepping do start to disconnect from the grid in the here and now, or if they're just waiting for the opportunity for the whole grid to go down.
I, again, I think it varies from person to person, or probably because of the reasons that they're doing it for. I mean, there's certain things that I think are universal across whatever level you're doing it. Like some of the things that you'll need. I've got a little list here. Uh, Water purification systems.
Yeah.
That's something you're going to have to have. That seems quite complicated. Non-perishable food and seeds to then grow food in the future. Um, First aid and medication, some sort of renewable energy source. We spoke about
Mm.
solar, obviously, there's wind and stuff as well. Um, and then the one that seems to carry across every single version of prepping or living off grid is a big fuck off gun.
Yeah.
That's what you need, either to shoot animals or shoot people, depending whether you live in America or not.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's for protection. I like it. Like I say, I got a catapult and shot myself in the hand, so I don't know. But you definitely would need some form of protection for that. We've all seen Evil Dead. We've all seen enough post-apocalyptic TV shows to know what happens. People go feral, and
Yeah,
yeah, once
and it
this,
seems really quickly as well in
yeah,
these situations.
who's
And I
to
suppose for preppers, they'll be thinking, "Oh, well, I've been getting ready for this for like the last 20 years." No, you can't come and have any of my grain. I've been growing this
mm,
for
mm.
ages.
I
Fuck
think
off.
it was Napoleon. I think it was Napoleon that said any city is 3 square miles away from revolution. Um, but yeah,
Yeah,
it's if people don't have anything to eat for a couple of days, I can just
yeah,
imagine
hangry.
exactly. Yeah, no liquid death for 24 hours, and they just go nuts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's my first one, the Doomsday People. I think they're doing it sort of to protect themselves and their family from whatever imaginary or vaguely not imaginary threat they perceive coming imminently.
Well, shall we hear from a friend of ours, James, who recently moved, as I said earlier, kind of semi off the grid. He's not off the grid, but he's moved away from the city and he's moving towards self sufficiency. And he's his motivations are slightly less, what would you say,
Radical.
radical or
Yeah,
apocalyptic. Um,
yeah.
and I'm just going to play an audio from him giving his reasons for why he's done what he's done. And I would ask you kindly to
I'm going to mute
shut
my
the hell
mic.
up.
Yeah.
Because last time you were just rabbiting all over that maths man. Right, here we go. James audio. I'm gonna. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm gonna have to switch this guy. There we go. There we go.
We left Sevilla. We've been living in the city for 8 years there, maybe 9 years, and cities before that. And I think for us, it was the right time to get away from the city. People might say, after COVID, just having a little bit more freedom and, getting away from stress. I think that is certainly part of it.
Yeah,
But I think, when we found that when we lived in the city, you don't go out as much as you think you probably do. It's nice to have all these things, but like when you say, oh, you got the cinema, you've got gigs, and then you go, well, let's see, how many times I've been to a cinema in the past year? Oh, maybe once. How many gigs have I been to? Oh, maybe one or two. And then, living here, we've probably done the same amount. We've been to a cinema, uh, and been to festivals and so forth, but actually found and discovered more parties and cultural things and fiestas in the countryside than there probably are in the cities. So nothing's been too hard really about leaving.
There we go. Thank you very much, James. Um, so he was talking a little bit about why he decided to move from Seville, which is quite a big city, to his little dwelling in Asturias. Maybe we'll play the little video of his land later on. But he's very proudly just built some steps. I think
yeah,
that's one of the exciting things about going off grid is that you get to play around with machinery.
yeah, massively. I mean, I, I think I sent all you boys a video of the steps that I made a while ago when I moved into this house.
They can't have been that
But
impressive. I've forgotten about
no,
that.
it was like 2 steps going up about a foot in the garden. But I
Well
was
done,
dead
mate.
proud of that. Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks, man. But then I look at what James has been up to, clearing land and creating an allotment and all this kind of thing. And it
It
all
makes you feel
feels,
inadequate.
it does, but it's all very appealing, isn't it? It's quite romantic, the idea of, providing your own
Yeah,
food and
absolutely. Yeah,
living on the side of a mountain, stuff like that. It sounds amazing.
growing a beard.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you've
just
done that well.
seeing vegetables. I remember I used to work as a probation officer, and sorry, I like to tell you one of my jobs
Yeah.
every week that I've had, just to see if you're surprised or not. But
When did you do all of
I
this?
was. You were drunk
Yeah,
for
okay,
10 years, and
yeah, yeah. I missed it.
this
Yeah,
was during that period. I was a probation officer. I remember that we were involved in this gardening scheme because they're always trying to get youths, young criminally minded folk into horticulture.
yeah.
And
Growing some potatoes. That'll
yeah,
fix
exactly.
fix the rapists.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It's grow a
Jeez.
potato. You'll never do cocaine again. But he's one of these lads. He'd never seen. He saw this guy who was doing the horticultural class pull a carrot out of the ground, and he almost passed out. Because he'd never see. He was like, "What the fuck? Where? What?" And the teacher, I can't remember his name. He's like, "Well, where did you think carrots came from?" He's like, "The fucking supermarket." I was like, "How did you think they got to the supermarket?" He had no idea, absolutely no idea about where his food came from. And I think that's another attractive aspect about going off grid is that you get to reconnect with the process of fueling your own body.
Well, no, that's exactly what I was going to say. That word reconnecting, isn't it? It's reconnecting with the earth. I don't want to sound too spiritual about it, but it feels really nice. And we said at the start, is it a bit like going back in time? And I guess it is.
It
It's like,
is, yeah, for sure.
whether it's going back to like the end of the First World War and the end of the Second World War, where people were growing a lot of food themselves, especially in this country,
Whoa.
or does it go way back further than that, to like Neanderthal man hunting and gathering? It
I mean,
feels very primal.
internationally, they all take the piss out of British cuisine because during the Second World War, we had rationing and we had to kind of make do with what we had. But at the same time, there was a big campaign called Dig for Victory, where
Yeah.
this is something that foreigners, well, speaking from my experience of living in Spain, they find quite unusual that everybody has a garden in England. Well, most people do anyway. It's kind of an expectation of having
Yeah.
a little square of lawn, but it very much comes from the Second World War, where we were encouraged to grow our own vegetables. Even in London, they had these
Mm,
tiny little vegetable patches that would cover the dugout, the bomb shelter, if you had one in your garden. Was it the
yeah.
Henderson shelter? I think it was called.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't. It was the Anderson. You agreed with me. Neither of us knew. It was the Anderson. But anyway, going back to connecting with the old ways draws me nicely towards the most well known, I think, off-gridders in humanity, the Amish, and
Mm,
I think you'd make a good Amish.
yeah.
I don't know if you should grow a beard. If I don't know, I think you look a little bit. You'd fit in with them. I think they wouldn't detect you as an English. You know what that's what they call all the people outside of the
Yeah,
bush
yeah.
community.
Anyone who's not is an English. Yeah,
Yeah,
I like the Amish. I'm glad you've brought these up.
I do.
I know some interesting Amish facts.
Throw some Amish facts at me.
So not all of them, but some of them, uh, depending on what sect you are. But on your 21st birthday, they pull out all your teeth and replace them with wooden teeth, so that you don't need modern medicine and don't have to go to the dentist. But I don't know why they do it on your 21st. That seems a bit shit.
So you got 21 years of just enjoying your teeth,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah. And then
and then they say
and they
no.
pull them all out and give you
Uh,
like wooden dentures.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm glad that you've got some Amish facts. I'll throw one back at you.
Okay.
The reason for the lack of a moustache in the beard is because the moustache they associated with the military. Because back in the times of conscription in during the First World War, most gentlemen or soldiers would wear a moustache. So they, out of protest, because they're staunchly anti-war and anti-military, would shave their moustaches off. So that's why they
Hmm.
have that little beard, that neck beard, the chin strap. They do use modern tools though. Um, so there's what they don't call them sects; they call them affiliations, and
Okay.
the different affiliations. Well, first off, I'll tell you how many Amish there are. There are 383,565 as of 2023. That's the old order Amish, which is the biggest affiliation. I think that's a group of affiliations. In the US, obviously, you know where they came. Do you know where they came from?
Uh, Holland.
Yeah, they're mostly Dutch, although they were spread out across Europe. There's some in Sweden, some in well, yeah, just all over the place. But they kind of Switzerland. Sorry, I said they kind of dissipated in Europe, and I think a lot of them just followed them across to the US because of
To
the
Pennsylvania
yeah,
and became a Pennsylvanian Dutch.
yeah, and they don't use modern technology depending on which affiliation they are. The one thing that most of them don't use is tractors for field work, because they believe that hard work is part of the kind of a biblical code, that you shouldn't avoid hard work. You should be out in the field working.
Hmm.
However, that doesn't apply to indoors. Motorized washing machines are the most commonly used. In fact, all of the affiliations bar one are permitted to use washing machines. Pressurized lamps, they can almost all of them use that. Chainsaws, 75% of them can use chainsaws, and pneumatic drills. But the interesting thing for me, because I started watching a lot of documentaries about the Amish during COVID, and again, like we've already said, I think COVID kind of reminded people that there are better ways to uh, look after yourself and take care of yourself. I think, especially in big cities, when we were all trapped indoors in small apartments, the idea of living out in the countryside was hugely appealing. I had friends that basically COVID didn't really exist for them because they were out in the fields. They could go and walk their dogs. It's like I was saying before about the law being different. In a scenario like COVID, the police aren't going to go out there and make sure that everybody's staying indoors. So they were just walking around, breathing fresh air, while we were all locked indoors. And that had a big impact on a lot of my students. Say that's one of the reasons that they now are considering moving off grid. But yeah, the Amish. I started watching videos about their lifestyle, and they all, number one, seem incredibly happy. Very
Yeah,
happy people.
yeah, yeah. They all seem to get on fairly well. I don't think there's a lot of infighting. It feels like they sort of know what they've got. They're all right with it until they turn 18 and do that Rumspringer or whatever it's called, and see a girl in a bikini in Florida, and then it all goes to pot a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. There's some commendable aspects of their community. I think, like for example, they have their own school system, and the kids only really stay in school until I think they're about 10, and then they start learning like life skills and trades. So they all get into a trade, which is usually agricultural, building, or construction, or something that is useful to the community on large. But that the community aspect is the strongest element of being Amish, is that you're always contributing. Everybody's helping each other
Mm.
all the time, and I think that's what communities all over the world used to be like. It depends where you are in the world, but when we think about 120 years ago, when the UK was off grid, um, you would speak to your neighbour, you would ask for help if you needed something, or you would share tools or whatever. I don't think we really get that so much in the city. Have you tried talking to someone in the city? Oh my God, it always ends in violence.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, that's a bit what James was saying in when I had the conversation with him earlier. He's actually met more people living out of the city than he ever did
Hmm.
living in the city. Uh, and there does feel like a stronger sense of community, which is a little bit lost here, isn't it? Like we've got these neighbours, they're nice, they're nice enough. Uh, they keep hinting at me that I need to cut down this tree in the garden, so I bought a chainsaw and I started cutting it down, and like a lot of it sort of landed in their garden and damaged some of their furniture, which they weren't happy with. But I imagine if they'd have been Amish, they'd have helped me rather than just let an idiot,
Just sneering at you.
clearly someone who doesn't know what they're doing, climb up a fucking tree with a chainsaw and gout,
Yeah, yeah,
which is
yeah.
not a great combination. Um, so yeah, I like the idea of helping out in the community. Um, and yeah, it is something that you miss when you're yeah, in the city and stuff, I suppose.
Well,
Um,
one of the strongest aspects of being inside the Amish community is, and one of the reasons I believe that they appear to be happy, at least, is that they're completely disconnected from the media, and from all of the things that are going on in the world. None of it affects them.
yeah,
Be it
yeah,
negative or positive, they're just it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen in their
I
lives.
I saw a documentary. It's quite a while ago, and it might have been "Escaping the Amish" or something, which I think was quite a long running TLC series. But they showed this Amish kid a picture of Britney Spears,
Hmm.
and he was like, "No, I don't know who that is."
Hmm.
And then like Michael Jackson, they showed him all these famous people or whatever, and no clue who they were, and just weren't influenced by any of that stuff. And I suppose that's quite nice, isn't it? If you're
Yeah.
not influenced by media and that, you just become you and be whatever version of you're naturally meant to be, which yeah, that's quite
Yeah, so
appealing,
you
isn't it?
don't have to. There's no competitive element in terms of like who's got the best trainers, because everybody's got the same hat and beard.
Yeah,
Like you
yeah.
don't. None of that
But,
exists.
but then is it who's got the best beard? Do you think?
Ah,
Do you,
maybe it might
do you
be.
think it comes out in other ways?
Yeah, maybe like, look at that guy's hat. Yeah, it's a bit tatty around the rim.
And then the women are like, "Oh, my jam is better than your jam." I don't know how I made that sound sleazy. I
It's
didn't mean to,
disgusting.
but you know,
And
my
they do
my
Another thing they do is singing. I've seen them. I've seen loads of videos of them just bursting into song.
Yeah.
They just seem like a happy bunch. One thing that I'll add before we move on to the next one is, although they do, they've had 75 people from outside of the community enter the community in the last.
What ever?
No, but in the
Oh,
last like 40 years, I think.
God, that's nothing,
It's
is it?
nothing. It's a very close community, and you can understand why that's a problem genetically. But
Yeah.
in terms of the genetics and congenital conditions, they don't actually seem to have that many problems. One thing that you will enjoy is that they have a very high incidence of dwarfism.
Yes.
I
Yes.
didn't know that, but apparently there's a lot of Amish dwarves.
Where?
The
We never
Amish,
put them on the
you're not
documentaries.
allowed. You're not allowed to see them. They're not for you. You're not part. You've got. If you grew a little bit more of a beard, you might be able to infiltrate
I'm
and go in
going
and
in.
go and
I'm
find them.
going in.
But
Uh,
yeah, generally they have like the more or less the same number of congenital disorders and conditions as society on large. So that's actually
Okay.
quite
Oh,
surprising because it's quite a close. I think that they try to they encourage the younger people to find a partner in another Amish community, so they're not kind of keeping it too close. But
yeah, I think they are quite spread out, aren't they? In terms, and they they're probably quite sensible with it. You know what I mean? Like,
they've just established an Amish community or colony, if you want, in Latin America. I was reading
really?
about earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've just moved over there. They moved to oh, was it? Where was it? I think it was. I can't remember. I think it was Mexico or somewhere, and they were there for like two. Oh no, where here it is. They moved to Argentina
Oh wow.
in 2020. 50 of them. By 2023, there were zero. They were like,
Oh,
no, this is rubbish. But in Bolivia, they've started a community that has grown since 2020. They 160 in 2020 and 190 in 2023.
hmm.
Yeah.
I'm surprised. I know they all go on holiday in Florida. I
Hmm.
know that's a big thing, isn't it? Not sure why, but I remember seeing that.
Well,
Yeah, I think they're nice people.
yeah, I want to join. We're not allowed in because our beards aren't strong enough. Our beard game is too weak.
I think mine is, man.
Yeah,
I'd never pass.
too wispy. Right, who are you bringing in next? Which off-gridders are you gonna enlighten us about?
Well, I would like to talk about one of my longest followed reality TV shows, the Alaskan Bush people.
Go on then.
Mm. I
They look
don't know if we've got
terrifying.
the image. Yeah, they're interesting. They're an interesting family. Put it like that. So the Alaskan Bush people are well, they consist of a family called the Browns. The Brown family, first came to my attention back in 2014. That's Billy Brown in the middle. You want to talk about a strong beard
Oh dear.
game. And next to him is his wife, Amy Brown. Uh, and then that odd looking bunch around them, 90% of their children. They've got a couple of other kids who went, fuck this, I'm just going to live in a city. And didn't really get involved. But yeah, so they were part of a reality TV show that started in back in 2014. Um, Billy Brown claims to have always wanted to live in the wilderness, in the middle of nowhere in Alaska, and they'd had various attempts at this. Previously, they lived on like a big houseboat and just went up and down the river, but something always went wrong. Uh, so, like the boat sank, which
Hmm.
was a big downer for them. Now, they're, they're an interesting family. I spoke briefly about reasons why people want to get away and maybe end up living in, especially Alaska. There's a lot of dodgy people in Alaska that
Yeah,
tend
it's a
to be
hostile
running.
environment as well.
Well, yeah, a lot of people tend to be running away from something else. Both Billy and Amy have a criminal history. Now, Amy is slightly less interesting. She had a history of a welfare fraud, and got in some trouble about that. Whereas Billy, the father of a family, has a criminal history of horse theft, which
Okay.
feels like a perfect reason to fuck off to Alaska.
Very
He's
niche.
already a cowboy.
Yeah.
He had quite an interesting childhood. His mum and dad were like really big industrialists, and very, very well off. And they both died in a plane crash in like the 50s or early 60s, I think it was. And this seemed to have set Billy on a bit of a path that just sort of he never felt like he fitted in after that, and he became a bit of a hippie. I think he was in a biker gang for a bit, so he was always on the fringe of society. And then he met up with Amy, who was also like a bit of a hippie, and eventually they just decided to pack up, move out. They lived on this boat. That went wrong, and then they just walked onto a patch of land in Alaska, which you're allowed to do if there's lots of areas in the wilderness of Alaska that they actually want people to inhabit. So they say, like, if you can get there, it's yours. You just have to go and put in a claim. It's massive, Alaska, no people. I think there's something like 8 bears every square mile,
Yeah.
which is terrifying. And yeah, so they moved on to it and have raised this family.
Is it a swamp? Why are they all stood in the water?
Alaska is mostly like lakes, isn't it? You know, and when you're living off grid, you want to be next to a lake because you know that's your
You don't want to live
source
in
of
it.
water. No, but yeah, but so they had all these kids, and they were all growing up quite nicely. So there's Matt. He ends up being an alcoholic. Then there's a guy called Bam Bam, which well, he's called Bam Bam, so he's screwed.
Yeah.
Another one called Bear Brown.
Tell me about the priest.
What priest?
There's a guy in the picture that stood to the right of I
Oh
guess
no,
Billy.
no, that's not a
He's
priest.
either a vampire or a priest. I
Yeah,
don't know.
that's this guy. That's one of the sons, Noah Brown. His full name is Noah Dark Cloud Brown,
Oh,
which
why? Like it's like they
and
want them to turn out the way they turned out.
well, he's the inventor of the group. To be fair, he's quite handy. You know, he can make stuff. He made a washing machine. You were talking
Out of
about
human skin.
yeah, but he's also like the creepiest. Um, I don't know, just the creepiest,
He's
nerdiest
got a crucifix.
guy.
He's got like a. He looks like something out of a Blade film.
Well,
He's,
because they're so like limited on what media they've seen, especially the older kids like Matt Bam Bam Bear. There's one called Gabe who's just got ADHD. He's constantly running. He never walks anywhere, and he's just always climbing trees for no reason and setting shit on fire. He's totally got ADHD. If he was in like a city, they'd benzo him up straight away. But they all develop these like sort of really odd personalities. The other thing they develop is
why.
well, they end up with this weird accent as well, which is just really. It sounds like nothing else at all.
That's quite interesting actually, because I suppose if they're so off grid that they're not actually around any kind of community, your accent isn't influenced by anything other than your empty surroundings. I don't know how. Like, I guess they sound like their parents, obviously, and
well, no, oddly not. It's a
no?
really weird combination of your. Probably should have got some audio, but you know, if you're on YouTube when we're finished, go and look up.
Link in description.
Yeah, we'll do that. And there's also two daughters. There's a Birdie, who is a hook, crooked toothed, witchy looking wench. And then there's their youngest daughter, Rainey, who I can say this now because she's like 23. Um, but like she was like the most normal, and I think she was
Yeah.
quite young when it started. She was born in 2002, and I think what year did I say it started? 2014. So she was a child when it started, but grew up with a little bit of outside influence. And out of all of them, she's normal and she's very attractive. The rest of them are all fucking freaks.
I,
Like,
I see they've
the
got
hills have
access.
eyes.
They've got access to firearms as well, which is slightly
Of
weird.
course, yeah, firearms, and they do a lot of hunting. They do a lot of really cool stuff. Like in Alaska, you've got the salmon rivers, and so they wait for salmon spawning time, and they're just pulling salmon out, and then they like preserve them in salt, and this all goes on for years with various like disasters
Mm.
in between. Like they have one camp that burns down, they build a log cabin that get, I think it got like eaten by bears. The whole place. They just went. They went into the city for a weekend and came back, and it had basically been eaten.
Yeah.
And as time goes on, from like 2014 all the way up to 2022, the boys, being boys, they all want to find women. They all want to find a partner. So that means they have to go back into the city, and most of the boys end up getting married um, to like women from the city,
Mm.
or mostly Alaskan women. A lot of them are like quite nice, and they end up having kids together, and all of this eventually sort of dilutes the family a little bit. And whereas before they'd live in like one big house, or one big sort of, they'd call it a barn, a bit like the Amish. They'd raise
Mm.
a barn and all live in there and be all self-sufficient. Eventually they start getting their own little properties on the land, and then Noah gets married and has a kid, and his wife doesn't get on with his sister. It all just, the quick, as it gets more diluted, it just starts going to shit fairly quickly. And it all culminates with Billy dying, unfortunately,
Mm.
um, a couple of years ago. And since then, they've all sort of gone back into regular life. None of them live in the wilderness anymore.
That's strange.
Uh,
That's it's not something that you see very often. Is people returning to the grid, going
yeah,
off grid, and then coming back to society? Because it must feel like you when you experience that level of freedom, like you say, this one of the mad kids. I suppose it's Bam Bam running around all over the place, climbing trees with a gun in his
mm,
hand.
yeah.
You can't really do that in the city
But
for very long.
that guy, the ADHD kid, I see him on TikTok all the time now.
Yeah.
He's just living in an apartment in California, just doing live TikToks. It's like,
That's
wow.
actually quite sad. That's depressing.
It is a shame
Yeah.
because so much of what they had going on there was amazing, and
Mm.
I think basically Billy, bless him, I think he was a fairly nice dude, but he was just a bit of a dreamer and probably didn't plan as well as he could, you know.
Mm.
Um, uh, and it was his dream, and his wife shared that dream, but
Well,
it wasn't planned out well
their
enough.
their reason for going off grid being to escape the consequences of their criminal lives, and going off the grid and then coming back again leads me nicely to what will possibly be our final off grid group of the evening, which is the Slab City group.
Oh, I love Slab City.
Yeah, it's your kind of place, isn't it?
Yeah, man.
Slab City is an old military base. It's called Slab City because of it was used as a military training ground for World War II, and then after World War II, it got abandoned, and there are all these concrete slabs everywhere. So that's where the name comes from. But it's one of, I think it is the largest temporary. I don't know what you call it, like an off-grid community full of people in trailers and RVs and camper vans, and most of them are on. In fact, I've got some data here about the where they get their money from, because there's another thing that we're interested in about how these people survive. Almost all of them get their money from the state. There's this term snowbirds for
Yeah.
people who come from cooler climates, and during the winter they go to Slab City, which is in California, and in the summer it's up to 50 degrees, but in the winter it's quite high as well. It's around 38, 34 at the highest. So a lot of these people come from the cooler states where they work. And they just take the winter off, and they get their government check, and yeah, it's basically just a big kind of hippie commune, full of art display. A lot of people that live there in their free time create these huge art pieces, these sculptures. One of which you can see on the screen at the moment, which is Mount Salvation, which was built by one of the founding guys of Slab City. I can't remember his name, which is great. But
Charlie Russell.
Yes, probably.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the guy. But yeah, he was one of the first guys to, and he built that over like 30 years. He died shortly after, and it draws a lot of tourism. A lot of people go there and take photos, and the locals have the opportunities to sell them things. So they get money from donations and things. It's basically creating their own economy, obviously still funded by the state, but there's no electricity or anything like that. They get all of their power from either generators or solar power. And yeah, it's just a big modern day hippie commune. There's only 50 permanent residents though, and they're all over 65. They're like retired people. So it's
an aging population.
yeah, but it's just the population swells as all of these people come away from their seasonal work to go and just take a part of the year off living in Slab City. So I don't.
Is it nice, or is it?
It's in the middle of the desert, man. It other than the images of like Salvation Mountain and the other, like, because there's a big art garden, which is made out of like old bottles, recycled stuff. Other than that, it's desert. They're in the middle of the desert. It's incredibly hot. It's a bit hostile, I think. But yeah, they've created this. People pull their trailers up next to each other, and they're all sitting outside enjoying the 50-degree heat. 50 degrees, I'm talking about Celsius. What's that in Fahrenheit?
That's nuts.
Like 122 Fahrenheit. It's crazy.
Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah.
But is it completely lawless, or is it?
They don't. I mean,
well, I suppose it comes under American law, doesn't it? But
yeah,
who's going to go out there and?
There's nobody. Yeah. The nearest town I think is about 10 miles away, and it's a very, very small town with one tiny supermarket, which is that they all use. But I wouldn't say that it's lawless, but I don't think there's anyone really kind of keeping an eye on them.
No, I mean it's in California, isn't it? Which is one of the
which is
more
lawless.
Relaxed.
Yeah, nobody gives a shit.
Yeah,
You can do what you want.
Yeah, no, I've come across Slab City in my ongoing addiction studies. I know at one point they did have a big crystal meth issue,
Yeah.
but I also read about them actually sort of controlling it themselves and getting rid of that element just by encouraging them to leave, is I think how they put it, which probably involved a gun. But like, I didn't realize it was like mostly older people and artists. I in my head it was a bit more lawless than that, and a bit bit like scary. But yeah, no, it sounds lovely.
I'd go there.
I guess
I'm
it's near, what's it called? Is it near Coachella? It must be.
Coachella, yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't know if it's near where that takes place, but it very much has the same smell about it. Yeah,
yeah. It feels like a similar vibe.
yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah,
Which
that sounds wicked, man.
I mean, it's interesting to see that people are seasonal off-gridders. That's the key here with this example is that they turn up in their RVs, and I think the RV is a kind of extension of off-grid lifestyle, except it's mobile. You get to move around, and that's a whole new episode to discuss the freedom of the road, because I think being off grid is a sense of freedom that comes with having control over your own resources, but the nomadic lifestyle that comes with being on the road is a different sense of freedom. You have control over your location and your scenery, but there's definitely a connection there that people, especially nowadays, are looking for that sense of freedom that they don't experience inside city and urban areas. Got to pay for my electricity. Ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, this is probably a bit. We were talking about the different levels of off gridding, weren't we? And yeah, I've been in a Winnebago, and I've lived in a lot worse places. Some of them are absolutely incredible. And yeah, doing it for 6 months of the year, it sounds great. But is that just going on holiday for a long time in a caravan? Is that really off gridding? Yeah, I suppose it is. I suppose in a sense, I think it has the romantic overtures of off gridding, doesn't it? But with the safety of knowing that you've got a government check coming in and there's a shop down the road,
Ultimately,
which is a bit what James has done, isn't it?
yeah, exactly, yeah. I
Yeah.
think ultimately, at the end of the day, this is something that people are seeking more now than ever before, because well, like I say, with COVID, it introduced remote working as a more common or more acceptable form of getting your salary, and that's allowed people the freedom to kind of not be stuck in one place or not be stuck in the city. So we can move around and we can live in places where we get a better quality of life, and I think that's basically where this new resurgence of the off-grid lifestyle comes from, and why it's such a blooming, blossoming industry, as well as the impending apocalypse.
Yeah, yeah. Overall, though, I find the whole idea very appealing. I know you do too.
Yeah.
I think I create space for myself within the house. Like I'm sat in my daughter's room now, which doubles up as the space that I do this podcast in, and that's my little island sanctuary. And sometimes it would be nice to have an actual island and go and live on that and live off that. But I don't think I could do it full time.
I've got zero skills. I'm literally. I mean, I'm hoping we've done our episode on cults, which is very interesting. I'm hoping, for me, the best possible chance at living an off-grid experience is that somebody invites me into a cult, because I'm so useless that I'll need other people to do all of the stuff for me.
Yeah.
I'm just putting that out there. If anyone's thinking of dreaming up a cult, I'm happy to follow anyone anywhere, as long as I understand from that episode, cults always end in some kind of orgy.
Yeah,
So that's
maybe
like
this would.
requirement.
Well, maybe you should go to Slab City with all the 70-year-old leathery Florida women.
Yeah.
That'd be nice. I don't know. Give it a whirl.
Well, on that
All
note,
right. What have we got to plug? Follow us on X. This show D&B. We put up stuff sometimes when I remember. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe and
Join
tell
our
your friends
cult.
about us. Yeah, join our weird little hour a week
Yeah.
cult.
If you've
Yeah,
got building skills or any self-sustainability skills, please help us to live in the wilderness.
nice.
There will be an orgy.
All right, so we've decided it's okay.
Yeah, it's good. It's thumbs up, double thumbs up to off-gridders. Well done, everybody.
Well done, people. All right, Ben.
Thanks.
Nice talking to you.
Okay, love you. Bye. Love you. Bye.
Love you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye.
Medically